right, guys, I don't even have to introduce myself because I know everybody, but welcome. Thank you for coming tonight. I'm really excited to share some nutrition knowledge with you guys. I love this quote. This is directly out of The Lancet, which is a well-respected, peer-reviewed medical journal. And I saw it when I read this, I was like, I just need to share this because I think this is such a staggering statistic. When we think about smoking, when we think about alcohol consumption and inactivity, poor nutrition trumps all of those when it comes to disease. So it's really important that you guys are already doing the workout piece, which is awesome. But now to take it up a notch and really think about fueling your body for those workouts, fueling your body to be the best you that you can be. And so two diets that I have personally had a lot of success with, I've had a lot of clients that I've had a lot of success with, are the Paleo and the Ketogenic diet. So trust me, I could talk about these two diets for days, but I have done my best to condense this information into one presentation that won't keep you guys here all night. But it's hard because they're both amazing lifestyles. I don't even like to call them a diet. And I will speak not only tonight from the scientific literature and the research, but also from my own personal experience because I have done the Paleo diet for 6 years. When we first opened the gym 8 years ago, Paleo was all the rage. It was just kind of hitting the scene, and so that's when we started right away, and we did that for 6 years. I, 2 years ago, switched to keto just on a whim. I had heard about all the benefits, and I just wanted to see what it was like, not thinking that I would be sticking with it for this long, because I also liked Paleo, but I have loved it so much that that's what I'm currently doing now. So I'll tell you guys just from my personal experience, I'll tell you kind of how the diets are similar and how they are different. So just really quick, the challenge, the details, it's going to be, like I said, we'll pick one or the other, a paleo diet challenge for 6 weeks or a ketogenic diet challenge for 6 weeks. The dates, it's going to start January 8th, that's a Monday, and then it's going to end, that 6 weeks will be over February 19th, that's also a Monday. But that being said, my goal is never to have this be just a 6-week commitment and then we go back to our old ways of eating. My goal is for you to extend that into a lifestyle, to keep that up through the year to the best of your ability, no matter which diet you choose. The criteria for the challenge, this year it's exciting, we're getting a new machine called the in-body scanner. So we're going to be using that, come on in Brian. We're going to use the scanner, it does not only weight, but it does body fat percent and percent muscle mass. So really interesting. I mean, it's not as accurate as a DEXA scanner or a hydrostatic weighing, of course, but it's kind of the next best thing. So we're really excited to have that to offer you guys, and we're going to do that both pre and post challenge to see how those metrics have changed. We're also going to do before and after pictures as usual, and then we'll do a baseline workout. So if you're an EvoFit person, you will do an EvoFit workout, the same one at the beginning and the end. If you're a CrossFit person, the same workout, the beginning and the end of the challenge. So all those factors will be taken into consideration when we decide on the overall winners. So this is what the in-body scanner looks like. It's really cool. You step on the electrodes with your bare feet, you hold on to the hand electrodes, and within 15 seconds, you get a printout. So this is a paper that you can actually take home with you. If you've come more than once, it will graph how your body weight, skeletal muscle mass have changed over time here. So that's kind of cool. You can keep that with you and refer back to it as the months go on. So what I want to talk about next, what I did last year. So at this time last year, I chose 2 people from the gym who were really motivated for the beginning of the new year. And I had started one on a paleo diet, and I started the other on a ketogenic diet. And I spoke with both of these gentlemen, and I said, this is something that I want you to stick with for the whole year. So one committed to doing a year of paleo, the other committed to doing a year of keto with check-ins with me every 2 weeks for accountability. And a year later, I want to show you those results because I thought maybe this will help people. And we're also doing a video where they're going to talk about their experience and why they are making each one a lifestyle. Okay, so our paleo guy is Chris Grouse. Some of you might know him. But this is him, January 1st last year. And this is his most recent picture. So he's still got a little bit of time to go, but he is 28 pounds down. He's 4 inches down in the waist. And he has gained strength, endurance, speed, he feels like an athlete a better athlete than when he was in high school. And that's from working out regularly, but also, and most importantly, a year of paleo. And that doesn't mean that he was strict the whole year. He will even say in the video and talk about how he's had some downfalls, but the important thing is he got right back on it. So that's what we talk about making it a lifestyle. So definitely a great difference. So here is our keto guy. His name is Ken Miles, another really great guy. And he, like I said, he started last January. He started a ketogenic diet, and he's been checking in with me bi-monthly or monthly, depending on some months, all year long. He has also lost 28 pounds, so that's pretty ironic, right? Both of them have lost exactly 28 pounds right now. Now, they still have some time left till the end of the year, and he lost 5 inches in his waist. So definitely such a change. And like Chris, he is stronger, faster, has better endurance, sleeps better, has better energy in general, and will not turn back from keto. He's definitely loves the foods he can eat. A female athlete, I want to show you another female on keto. This is Kelly, and some of you may know Kelly and you've seen these pictures, but she started keto with me last July, so a year ago in July, and this is her this July. So Kelly has lost 36 pounds and 6.5 inches in her waist. So she has definitely transformed her body. A few weeks ago, she got her first pull-up. Like, this is a girl who never thought in her life she'd do a pull-up. So, I mean, it can be life transforming, but this didn't happen in 6 weeks. It happened in a year. And that's what I want to tell you. The challenge is awesome because it gets you motivated, it gets you started, it gets you feeling really good. But where we really see results is if we can keep it up for a year and onward. All right, so we're going to delve in to really understand these diets. We've got to talk about the macronutrients, okay? So the first macronutrient is protein. This is what our food is composed of. So protein is the building blocks of our muscles and tissues, okay? So it's made of amino acids. It's very important for people who are active, as all of you are. Examples of great protein sources are beef, chicken, and turkey, and that can be both the dark or light meat. On keto, we're going to talk about why the dark meat is preferred because it is more fatty. Fish, eggs, and then protein powder and protein shakes. We're going to talk about the best options there, but generally a whey protein, a beef protein isolate, or an egg protein are really convenient options to have with you if you need a little protein when you're in a bind. And protein helps us to build lean muscle mass, which is really important to help keep our metabolism going. Our metabolism is and that lean muscle mass is what helps us to burn more calories when we're just sitting around doing nothing. So muscle mass is really good. We want that. The second category of macronutrients is fat, and fat is super important. It makes up every cell membrane in our body. It's essential for proper brain and hormonal function. It slows the rate of gastric emptying, so that means we're going to stay fuller longer when we eat fattier foods because it doesn't leave our stomach as quickly. And it's the most powerful source of fuel for our body. So if we think about the analogy of a fire, okay, the fat is like the log on the fire. Okay, it takes a little bit to get that log ignited and get it to start burning, but once you do, it's going to burn more clean, it's going to burn longer. So that's a really good source of energy for our body. So what are the healthy fats? Let's talk about that. Coconut products, whether it's coconut oil, coconut milk, coconut flakes can be a good snack. Butter is another really good saturated fat. Coconut and butter are great saturated fats, and they're great for cooking with because they have high smoke points. So another great oil is olive oil, but that has a lower smoke point, so you wouldn't necessarily want to cook with olive oil. It's great to drizzle on a salad or something, but not necessarily for cooking. That would be more for the coconut oils or the butter, and grass-fed butter is always going to be your best option. You can see a picture, it's called Kerrygold. You can find that really at any grocery store. So avocados are a great source of fat, nuts, and also avocado oil. So avocado oil is great for cooking with as well. The fats we want to stay away from, which are inflammatory in the body, are the vegetable oils. So canola oil, soybean oil, trans fat, margarine, all of those have an inflammatory effect. So we want to keep those out of the diet as much as we can and have these from the good list. Now mayonnaise, a lot of people ask me about that. Isn't mayonnaise unhealthy? It really isn't if you can find an avocado oil-based mayo, because Hellmann's and Duke's, all of those are soybean or canola oil-based. So again, it's going to be more inflammatory in the body. Sir Kensington's and Primal Kitchen both make a really good avocado oil-based mayo, which can be a great healthy part of a keto or paleo diet. All right, so the third category of macronutrients, and this is where it gets a little bit complicated. This is the carbohydrate. So examples of carbohydrates, these are basically what we think of, right? So we all know that bread, rice, pasta, grains, cereal, that type of stuff is a carbohydrate. But also candy and soda, so all sweet things, desserts, those are carbohydrates as well, and fruits and vegetables. So a lot of people don't realize that fruits and vegetables also fall into that carbohydrate category. I'm highlighting these two because these are the only ones allowed on a paleo diet. So paleo doesn't allow either of these categories of carbohydrates, and on a ketogenic diet, vegetables are the only carbohydrates allowed, at least in the beginning. Okay, and we'll talk about why that is. But the one thing to remember is that whether it comes from a Pop-Tart or a carrot or a piece of bread, the byproduct of all of these things is glucose, which is a simple sugar. So the carrot also had some fiber and some vitamins and minerals packaged along with it, where the Pop-Tart is just straight up sugar. So there's no nutritional value there. So the benefit of fruits and vegetables when it comes to carbohydrates is they do have some fiber and they have some micronutrients, some vitamins and minerals packaged along with that sugar. And carbs are the easiest energy source for the body. So if we go back to the fuel analogy, the campfire analogy, carbs are like the kindling, okay? So think of like the little twigs and the newspaper that get the fire burning, but they also burn out really quickly. Okay, so that's why if you have like a standard American breakfast, maybe a bowl of cereal with skim milk, a banana, and some orange juice, that's all carbohydrate. So you might feel good for about an hour, but by the time you get to school or work or to the gym, your blood sugar is going to be low again, and you're going to be craving more carbohydrates because they're all used up. Now, if you would have had, for example, maybe some eggs, some bacon, a side of fruit, you'd have a lot more sustained energy. It wouldn't be just the carbohydrates. All right, so to understand a little bit more the difference between these diets, let's look at the pie charts, okay? So it should be clear when you look at these colors. The first is the standard American diet. It's kind of coincidental that it's also called the SAD diet. So the SAD diet, you can see that over half of the diet is coming from carbohydrates, half the calories. Then we have about 20% protein and then about 27% fat. All right, you can see we're going to progressively get more fat here. We have about 39% fat, so the fat and protein are pretty much equal on a paleo diet. The carbs are only making about a quarter of that diet. So there's substantial reduction in the standard American diet to the paleo diet with carbs, but then even more reduction with the ketogenic diet. So it's more like 5 to maybe 8% carbs here. The majority of this diet is going to be fat and then a little bit of protein. It can be like, that says 13, it can be more like 20, especially if you're active. So if we're going to wrap our minds around the fact that we're endorsing a diet that has that much fat in it, I want you guys to understand why fat is not bad for you. Fat is not going to make you fat as long as it's not consumed in conjunction with high processed sugars, which most things in the standard American diet are. Like think about a donut. It's high sugar and high fat. Think about a hamburger. Bun, burger, it's high sugar and high fat. But we're going to talk about some ways if you take those carbs away, the high-fat foods are great for you. All right, so I want to show you a short little clip from a documentary called Fathead. And it really does a good job of explaining why, what went wrong and why we thought fats were bad in the first place. So just bear with me, it's just a few minutes. Oh, jeez, it's a commercial. Sorry.
If you could pack all of human history into 1 year, we've only been farming and eating grain since about yesterday, which is when we became shorter and fatter. We only started consuming processed vegetable oils about 10 minutes ago, which is when heart disease became our #1 killer. So after examining all this human history, the experts came to the obvious conclusion. We need to eat a lot more of these. And so they convinced us that human health depends on foods we didn't eat for more than 99% of our entire existence. How did this happen? In the 1950s, a biochemist named Ancel Keys published a study that compared heart disease and fat consumption in a half dozen countries. The more fat, the more heart disease. The trend line was unmistakable. Just one little problem. Keys left out countries where people eat a lot of fat but have very little heart disease, like Holland and Norway. He also left out countries where people don't eat much fat but do have a lot of heart disease, like Chile. In fact, Keys had reliable data from 22 countries, and the results were all over the place. But you can't make a big splash in the scientific community with a trend line that looks like this. So Keys did what any dedicated researcher would do. He threw out the data that didn't fit and published his results. His punishment for this bit of scientific chicanery was to get his picture on the cover of Time magazine. Keys became known as the father of the lipid hypothesis, which says that eating saturated fat raises the cholesterol in your blood, and high cholesterol in your blood clogs your arteries and causes heart disease.
The hypothesis that when you eat high fat, that produces high cholesterol, and the cholesterol produces heart disease, is wrong in every one of those legs.
This whole idea that dietary fat causes cholesterol problems is sort of a myth. The whole idea that cholesterol problems lead to heart disease is a myth.
The theory was completely and totally wrong. It was a theory that was made out of whole cloth and then pushed.
The term artery clogging saturated fat, it's as though it's all one word.
It's become part of the zeitgeist. Everybody knows saturated fat is bad for you, but when you get back and you start looking at the medical literature and you root back through to find out where this whole idea came from, it's bogus.
3 authors who did root through the medical literature are science writer Gary Taubes, Swedish doctor Uffe Ravensskov, and British doctor Malcolm Kendrick. When they examined the data from all the big studies on heart disease, they discovered some pretty interesting facts. Here's my favorite. Guess how many studies actually prove that a high-fat diet causes heart disease? The answer? 0. That's right. None. In some of...
All right, so this is an awesome documentary, guys. If you haven't seen it, I would recommend it. But that really did a great job of explaining what happened and why one guy, Dr. Ancel Keys, kind of started the whole USDA guidelines. Remember, I'm going to show a picture of it, but the first USDA dietary guidelines was published in 1980, and it was based on the findings of Ancel Keys. So this is what it looked like. There was 6 to 11 servings of grain recommended at the bottom of that food pyramid. Then you had the fruits and vegetables. Then you had a little protein and tiny little bit of oil and fat on the top. So if you look at that, over half of that pyramid is carbohydrate. Okay, and so that's kind of what we went with. So if you look here, this is the CDC's report of the obesity rate in America back in 1980. Right before those guidelines were published, there was not one state in our country that had a greater than 20% obesity rate. If you fast forward to 2015, there is not one state in our country that has under a 20% obesity rate. So something big happened between here and here. And if you look at this graph, I know it's kind of hard to see, but this shows the year 1980 is when the weight in the population, percent of the population started to really gain weight, started really going up. 1980, the year those dietary guidelines were published. And what happened during that time? Well, Americans cut their consumption of whole eggs, especially the yolk. They cut butter and they cut red meat, and they started eating a ton more rice, crackers, granola bars, cereal, all of those processed carbohydrates that we were led by the USDA to think were the best options. So things are starting to change, and these are all really good signs of that. So last year, Time Magazine came out with their cover saying, "Eat butter, why the science was wrong." Dr. Asim Malhotra, a cardiac surgeon, came out with a documentary called The Big Fat Fix, why fat is actually good for your heart and can help prevent heart disease. Eat Fat, Get Thin. There's a ton of books out now promoting a higher fat diet. And we're starting to realize what the real culprit is, okay? So these are two headlines. One's from the New York Times, one's from the Daily Mail last year. 50 years ago, sugar industry quietly paid scientists to point blame at fat. How the sugar industry paid prestigious Harvard researchers to say that fat, not sugar, is what caused heart disease. So it was all a payoff. And it's really sad because there were a lot of lives that were affected by this false information. But so now we're starting to turn to look at sugar as the culprit in these things. So the way that works, if you think about a nice, clean, healthy blood vessel, it's nice and smooth. And what happens when you consume a lot of sugar, especially the processed sugar, it acts like a Brillo pad. So it kind of scrubs against those arteries and makes little lacerations. And with those lacerations comes a lot of inflammation. And it's the inflammation that causes the plaque to build up. Okay? So it's not necessarily the fat and the cholesterol content, it's the sugar that's really doing damage in those arterial walls and causing that buildup. So, overcarbsumption. I love this term. It's the chronic overconsumption of supernormally stimulating, nutrient-poor, and carbohydrate-rich foods. These are the things we tend to overeat, right? We call them the food without breaks, because you can't just have a little bit. And they are designed that way. A lot of them are designed to have sugar, which we're going to talk about as being an addictive drug, or carbohydrates through starch that do the same thing. So all of these things are not allowed on either a keto or a paleo diet. And we're going to talk about why. So just some facts in terms of carbohydrates and sugar. Americans consume an average of 150 pounds of sugar a year. So if you guys think about those 5-pound bags that you see at the grocery store, that would be 30 of those stacked up. 30 bags for one person. And that equates to about 22 teaspoons per day. All right, so there you can see the 22 teaspoons lined up. And we can all visualize a teaspoon because it's kind of like a spoonful, right? But when you look at a label, it doesn't tell you teaspoons, right? What does it give us? Grams. So it's confusing. But just so you guys know, each teaspoon is 4 grams of sugar. Okay, so one thing that did come, a good thing that came out of the latest dietary guidelines that were published in 2015 is for the first time they put a limit on dietary sugar. And they said the recommendation for males is 9 teaspoons a day or less, and for females is 6 teaspoons a day or less. Okay, when before there was no limit on dietary sugar. They also took the limit off of dietary fat and cholesterol, which is another huge thing to kind of get all of this straight. So that being said, we know that the recommendation. I wanted to put up here just some common foods. Okay, so a can of soda, 9 teaspoons. Okay, that's your limit for the day. 1 can of soda. Candy bar, 8 teaspoons. A small Starbucks drink, 11. A cup of orange juice, 6. So a lot of people will say, but I thought juice was healthy. Well, yeah, there's some vitamins and minerals, but what you do when you juice something is you remove all the fiber. So now the sugar with some of the vitamins and minerals is left over, and it's kind of mainstreamed into your blood. Whereas if you ate the whole orange, you'd be getting the fiber too, which slows down that blood spike and the insulin response. Okay, so juice really isn't that healthy in the big picture. Even a banana, okay, so a piece of fruit, 5 teaspoons of sugar in 1 banana. So if you guys are thinking about this in terms of looking at a food label, all right, you're like, all right, I gotta make sure I'm staying under my 6 teaspoons. If I'm a female, you do the math. 6 times 4, so 24 is your allotment for the day. And you'd be astounded if you looked at most things, even ketchup, condiments, things you don't even think of have a ton of added sugar in them. So here, I just always like to show this to show you all the different aliases of sugar, because people have become really smart producers of products, and they know that we're looking out for things on food labels now and ingredient labels. So it may not say sugar, most times it doesn't, but it could say maltodextrin, it could say dextrose, it could say lactose, it could say maltose, it could say malt syrup, any of these things, fructose, galactose, all of these things are really code words for sugar. So you have to kind of be a detective when you look at the back of a food label. The other thing, I wanted to show this nutrition label because by July of 2018, it's a requirement now that all food labels have to contain the added sugar line, which I think is awesome. Okay, so not only is it going to tell the total sugars, but how many were not naturally in that product and they added it to. So if you get your kids like little fruit cups for their lunch, and yes, you want them to have the natural sugar that's in the mandarin oranges or whatever, but now you're going to realize there's 20 grams of added sugar or whatever it is, and that might not be the best option. The mandarin oranges could have been sweet enough by themselves, so why are they putting that much sugar? That's the question. Another interesting one, when they put this on a Coke can, it will say there are 65 grams of added sugar. So it may make people think twice before they actually drink that, when it's a lot more clear how much actually added sugar is in a product. All right, so how does this work? This is a little bit sciencey, but I think it's important to understand. Sugar and insulin are what cause fat gain and prevent fat loss. So when we ingest sugar, and this example is for a piece of bread, which, like we said, breaks down to glucose, which is sugar. When we ingest that, our blood sugar, or blood glucose, increases rapidly. There's a lot of sugar in it. At the same time, our insulin level increases rapidly, and insulin is our storage hormone. Okay, it's produced by our pancreas with the purpose of taking that sugar out of those blood vessels, because remember, we talked about what sugar does to the blood vessels. So it's important that insulin works properly, because it removes the sugar from the blood vessels and it stores them. Okay, and there are two different places that it's going to store the sugar. The first is your liver and muscle glycogen, okay? And it doesn't take a lot to fill those, okay? So maybe think of like the equivalent of a cup of pasta, and you're going to have your muscle and liver glycogen full. Anything you ingest more than that is going to be stored as fat for times of future famine, okay? So that was a mechanism that was evolutionarily put into our ancestors because they didn't know when their next meal was coming. Okay, but fast forward to today, we're just as efficient as storing excess fuel as fat, but we are never in a time of famine, most people. I mean, there's always a vending machine down the hall or a gas station around every corner. We have food readily available. So this kind of just goes over what I talked about, the two places that's going to be stored. And insulin, think of insulin like the key, okay? Insulin's going to unlock the cell and allow that sugar to come out of the blood vessel and be taken up and stored for times when we need it later, okay? Any questions about that? I know that's a little bit sciencey. All right. So the other thing we have to realize is that carbs are addictive, okay? They are definitely a potential fuel source for our body. They provide our fuel for our body and our brain, but they are also a drug. So the same receptor sites in our brain that respond to the opiates and heroin and cocaine also respond to sugar. So this is a PET scan of the brain where you can see that. Those same centers are lighting up, and you get those same endorphins. That's why when you eat a piece of cheesecake, or a thick crusted piece of pizza, or some chocolate, you feel really good for a short period of time, but that feeling goes away quickly and you want more, right? And it's the same thing with a drug. Sugar is a very powerful drug. So we are addicted to it. I always like to share a study that was done on a group of mice. The researchers had a crate, and on one side of the crate, they put a liquid dropper of liquid cocaine. So it was just a clear dropper. So the mice went to it, and within a day or so, they were all addicted to that. Well, a day later, they went to the other side and put an identical dropper of sugar water. The mice also had a source of fuel, so they had mice food as well. But after going to the sugar water, they never went back to the liquid cocaine. So it just shows how addictive sugar is. And unfortunately, I really do think, unfortunately, it's legal and it's everywhere. So one thing that's really important is that one of the similarities between paleo and keto is that they both really limit added sugar. Keto more so, but paleo as well. Both diets want to really limit added sugar so that our blood sugar is low and our insulin is low, and that makes for steady energy throughout the day. All right, so let's start with the paleo diet. All right, this is the way our Paleolithic ancestors ate tens of thousands of years ago. This was a time when, before the Industrial Revolution, before food was processed, before hormones and additives were added into foods. So it was foods that grew in the ground or on trees. It was animals that these people were able to hunt or fish. And this is a time when sugar was not readily available like it is today. So definitely a whole different world. This is the simply put way. Everybody's like, can you just give me a list of foods that I can eat on paleo? Well, here it is. Here's your list. Any meats, any vegetables, any nuts, except peanuts, which are not technically a nut, they're a legume. Okay? Any seeds, some fruit, little starch. And that's important too, because fruit and starch, like potatoes, sweet potatoes, tubers, they all have a pretty high insulin response. Very similar to that of breads and grains and that kind of thing. So you can have some fruit and little starch, but no sugar. So pretty black and white there. What can't we have on paleo? Dairy. So dairy is a big one. And this is a big difference between keto and paleo. Okay, so on paleo, they say no dairy. Butter is the exception. Butter has pretty much all of the lactose, that sugar, the milk sugar taken out of it. So most people don't have a problem with butter or ghee, which is clarified butter. No grains. So everything from bread, rice, pasta, crackers, millet, buckwheat. Corn is actually a grain. A lot of people think corn is a vegetable. It is a grain. Quinoa is a grain. Legumes. So like I said, peanuts are legumes. So no peanuts, no peanut butter, no beans of any sort. Beans are legumes. So black beans, kidney beans, garbanzo beans, which includes hummus. Green beans in moderation. Different paleo people will say that they are okay. Added sugars, of course, we know are off. And then the inflammatory oils. So the ones we talked about, like the canola oil, the corn oils, that type of thing. So it's pretty simple. I tell people it's simple, but it's not easy, right? It's simple what's on it, but it's not easy to follow, at least in the beginning, as your body's kind of detoxing from the sugar. And that's one important thing I kind of skipped over with that mouse study and with the addictive nature of sugar, is that's why in the first few weeks of a paleo challenge or a ketogenic diet, you have withdrawals. Like you almost feel like you want to just go curl up in bed. You have a headache, your workouts feel horrible, you have no energy, you're craving every sugary thing on the planet. Things you haven't ever wanted in months now seem really appealing because you can't have them. We call it the carb flu, or the keto flu, or the paleo flu, and it passes if you don't give in to those temptations. So you have to just hold out, let your body get tapped into using other sources of energy other than sugar as fuel. So what are the benefits of a paleo diet? Why would I want to do this anyway? Well, the first is it can reverse type 2 diabetes, and it can do that really quickly. Because when you bring that blood sugar level down by cutting out a lot of the processed carbs and sugar, your insulin level also comes down and you become more insulin sensitive, which in the case of a type 2 diabetic, they have become insulin resistant because of being exposed to too much sugar over time. So it can be very easily reversed on a paleo diet. It can reverse and prevent heart disease, which is the #1 killer in this country. It can treat diseases of the digestive system, so ulcerative colitis, Crohn's, and celiac. These are usually issues with lactose, which again is that sugar in milk, and gluten, which is a protein found in grains. And these kind of wreak havoc on our digestive system. So once these are taken out of the diet, these symptoms go away. So no diarrhea, constipation, bloating, inflammation, all that stuff goes down, and those conditions can be reversed. Because 80% of the immune system is located in the gut, once you heal the gut by removing those problematic foods, you're not going to get sick as often. You strengthen your immune system. So things like the common cold that used to get you every year, you're now not suffering from. Increased energy to perform better in workouts, which we could all use that. It helps to develop lean muscle mass, which again fuels our metabolism. And it leads to body fat loss. So all great things in terms of overall health, all great benefits of a paleo diet. So next I'm going to take you guys through a sample day so you can see like, okay, are these foods things that I would actually eat, okay? So for breakfast, one option could be 3 eggs scrambled with coconut milk. You could add spinach, tomatoes, and mushrooms sauteed in, some bacon, and then coffee with coconut milk creamer. So that's a really good breakfast option. And this is a great creamer. It's called So Delicious. So if you guys are used to using like a coffee mate, and you think you'll never love your coffee again, that really kind of does the trick in those regards. All right, here's a snack. So between breakfast and lunch, you could do a protein shake. So a scoop of whey protein. I always recommend the Stronger, Faster, Healthier brand because it's made from grass-fed cows. It's a very clean source of protein. You can mix that with either water or coconut or almond milk. You always want to get the unsweetened version, of course. You could pair that with an apple and some almond butter. So you're getting a protein, carb, and fat with your snack. Potential lunch options. Jimmy John's Unwich, that thing can be a lifesaver. They deliver, so it's pretty awesome. Again, you would have to do no cheese, of course. Probably double meat to have it fill you up. And then if you guys have seen, Jackson's Honest is a great brand of potato chips. They have sweet potato chips. The only ingredients are sweet potatoes, coconut oil, and sea salt. So that would be an acceptable chip that you could have on a strict paleo diet. Another option could be grilled steak, broccoli, and salad. All right, a snack in the afternoon if you're hungry could be a hard-boiled egg, a quarter avocado, and a handful of strawberries. Elizabeth's getting hungry.
Well, no, I feel she's probably getting tired.
She's fine. Don't worry. You can rock her. She's fine. So good. Again, just pairing the protein, carb, and fat combination there. Dinner options. You could do meatballs, half a sweet potato, and broccoli or zoodles. If you guys have not tried zoodles, they're awesome. There's a little machine you can get on Amazon, or you can buy them already zoodled up, and they make a great pasta substitute. All right, questions about paleo before we move on to keto. We're going to go back to a little bit about paleo too. All right, so the ketogenic diet. Nutritional ketosis is the metabolic state in which the body is using predominantly fat as its main fuel source, okay? And the metabolic byproduct of breaking down fat as fuel is ketone bodies, okay? Or are ketone bodies. And there are 3 different ones. And ketone bodies serve as an alternative fuel source to our brain, to our organs, and to our muscles when glucose or sugar is low in the body. So ketones are the only thing other than glucose that can cross the blood-brain barrier and fuel the brain. Okay, and they actually provide a lot cleaner, a lot more energy than glucose does. But this ketogenic state is only possible when carbs and insulin levels are kept low for an extended period of time. So it kind of helps me to think about things in analogies. So I always tell people, I'm sure this has happened to you because it's happened to me. You've been at a restaurant, it's past your dinner time, the waiter is taking forever, the kitchen is taking forever, and you're hangry, right? Like you are starving, you want your food now, you're being rude to your date or your kids or whoever's with you. And this should not happen because even the most lean individual has more than 40,000 calories stored on their body at any given time as fat. Even the most lean individual. But why is it that person can't tap in to this huge energy store and they're like pissed off there in the restaurant, like they're just really mad. So this comes down to not being able to tap in your fat stores because insulin is high, insulin is elevated. So I also think about the analogy of a fuel truck. We've all seen a big shelf fuel truck on the expressway. This whole tank is filled up with gasoline. Well, imagine the irony of this truck being pulled over to the side of the road because it's run out of gas, right? Its tiny little fuel tank is empty, and here it can't tap into these gallons and gallons of fuel that it has stored. That's the same thing that's happening in humans when we're not fat adapted. We have a very small fuel tank for storing sugar. Remember, it's just those glycogen stores in our liver and our muscle. Everything else goes to our fat stores. And if we're not able to tap into those fat stores, we're not very efficient. So that's where keto becomes such a great idea. So a little bit more information. The ketogenic diet has been around actually since the 1920s, and it was first used as a treatment for epilepsy, especially in children who weren't responding to the traditional treatments. So they were responding very well to lowering their carbs extremely low and really upping the fat in their diet. No seizures whatsoever. And the ketogenic diet is completely safe. I always have to add this in because that will be a common question. We are actually born in a state of nutritional ketosis. That's our native state. If you remember, you probably have it fresh in your memory, but there's a few days after the baby's born before your milk comes in. And I remember those days. That's when that baby is in ketosis, and that's how the baby is thriving and surviving during that time. Ketones are water soluble. So if you have more in your system than you can use, you will urinate them out. They're not going to accumulate and make your body this acidic thing, okay? You'll be able to excrete them through your urine. And nutritional ketosis is not ketoacidosis. So if you Google the ketogenic diet, you probably have heard of this term, but it has nothing to do with a well-formulated ketogenic diet. Ketoacidosis is a condition in type 1 diabetics who do not have a functioning pancreas, so they don't produce any insulin at all. And that this happens when their ketone levels go up extremely high, and they have no insulin to help regulate that. So what happens in this case is their level is going to be around 25 millimoles per liter of ketones in their blood. In nutritional ketosis, your level is going to be between 0.5 and maybe 5 millimoles per liter. So it's totally different. This is a very low level of ketones in your blood. Ketoacidosis is a very high level. So two totally separate things. Ketogenic diet is completely safe. So what are the benefits of a ketogenic diet? The first, and this is one that most people start a ketogenic diet for, is fat loss, okay? And it happens relatively quickly when you become fat adapted. The benefit as well is that ketones are muscle sparing. So that main ketone body called beta-hydroxybutyrate spares leucine, which is the main branch chain amino acid responsible for protein synthesis. So because of that, usually if you go on a weight loss program, you're going to assume that part of that is fat, but you also have to assume that part of that is muscle mass, especially if you're restricting calories. But on a ketogenic diet, because of that muscle sparing effect, the weight that comes off is going to be fat mass. So that's another thing I'm really excited to have this new in-body scanner to be able to see that difference in not only the body fat loss, but also in the muscle maintenance or even gain. Improved cognitive function. Again, those ketones are fueling the brain. They're a superior fuel source, so you have more mental clarity, reduced brain fog, more energy. And again, the ketones provide 38% more energy than the same amount of glucose, so you are not going to have those slumps in the afternoon that some of us are accustomed to. You're going to find that you're waking up before your alarm goes off in the morning, ready to go, which is a great feeling. Satiety. This is a huge one, and this is one of the main reasons I probably still do keto, is because it's so liberating not to be at the mercy of snacks or a meal all the time. Even if they're healthy things, you don't have to continually be carrying protein bars and nuts and beef jerky along with you because you are so satiated. And that's, especially when you're starting a diet, that is huge. Like if you are using up all your willpower and you're hungry all the time because you're restricting calories and you're eating very little fat, it's only a matter of time until you're going to throw in the towel. But if there's a diet out there where a week in I feel like I don't need to have 5 snacks throughout the day and I feel completely satiated, I'm going to be able to stick with that. So that's a huge benefit. You don't have the sugar cravings and the desire to snack. Reduced inflammation, which is huge because inflammation is at the root cause of all of our chronic diseases. So the main ketone body, beta hydroxybutyrate, prevents the accumulation of an inflammasome in the body. So when it does that, it prevents inflammation from building up. And increased performance. And this is a big one for a lot of people who are really interested in their workout performance because they don't want that to tank. And a lot of people say, well, how am I going to be able to do high intensity training on a ketogenic diet? And that's a great question. But what we do know is that a ketogenic diet decreases lactate production. So you guys all know what it feels like being on the Airdyne, right? We know what that feeling in our legs. That decreases the production of lactate, which is huge. It also increases our recovery because of the reduced inflammation. We have better post-workout recovery time. Now, the ketogenic diet has been used a lot in the endurance community because when you're doing like a steady state type of training, you're not going into those higher intensity training zones that require glycogen, such as CrossFit or EvoFit, where we do go there, right? So that's why it's a little bit harder in the beginning of someone doing a high intensity program to feel good in the beginning of a ketogenic diet because they go through those glycogen stores and then they have nothing. And it's like you're hitting a wall until your body's able to adapt to burning fat. And it does take some time. So I'm going to give you some examples in the endurance community as well as of a study that was just done in the CrossFit community. All right, so this is one that was done in 2016. Dr. Jess Volek, it's his FASTER study, and this was on endurance athletes. So he took 20 elite endurance athletes. These are marathoners, ultra-marathoners, and he took half of that group and they did a low-carb, high-fat diet for at least 6 months. So this is the first study that's been done on long-term keto. Now, if he would have done this diet a week in, these results wouldn't be anything like they are. But 6 months down the road, when people really had time to keto adapt, that made the big difference. So the other half of this group stayed on the traditional ultra elite marathoners diet, which is very high carb, upwards of 400 grams of carbs a day to support that training. This group was very low carb, high fat. So both groups ran on a treadmill for 3 hours. Pretty boring, right? 3 hours at 65% of their VO2 max, which this is an average running pace for elite endurance athletes. They all kind of maintained that pace. And after that, what they found was that fat oxidation was on average almost 2.5 times higher in the low carb group. That just means that they burned 2.5 times more fat than the non-keto adapted group during that training. Also, which I think is most interesting, is there was no significant difference in pre and post exercise glycogen concentrations in those two groups of athletes. Meaning that after 6 months of doing a ketogenic diet, these athletes are able to replenish glycogen stores without sugar. And I can tell you from my personal experience, this is exactly what happened with me in CrossFit. Because for 6 months, I did not feel like I was up to my same level of performance that I was pre-keto. But I stayed on the diet because I loved being satiated, I loved the mental clarity, I loved all the other things, and the performance, I wasn't going to the games. It was just like, I'm still doing well, just not as well. But at about that 6 month period, I felt like I could really take it up a notch. And that's when the body, at least according to this story, is able to synthesize glycogen through the breakdown of fats. So through the fatty acid metabolism, which is pretty cool. So that they were able to have the same amount of glycogen pre and post race really gives us hope as CrossFitters. Yeah, you're not going to feel great in the beginning. It may take a while, but if you stick with it, and Steve will say the same thing. He's been doing it for the same length of time I have, and it took quite a while for him to get back to his pre-keto performance. All right, so this is another study in a group of CrossFit athletes. So it's called a low-carbohydrate ketogenic diet combined with 6 weeks of CrossFit training improves body composition and performance. This was out of James Madison University. And this is a very short-term study. So 6 weeks, I mean, they could be partially keto adapted, but probably not even fully keto adapted at just 6 weeks. But what they saw was that, look at the ketogenic group. And in this case, it was 28. They took 28 CrossFitters. For 6 weeks, both groups did 4 CrossFit workouts a week, the same exact workouts, but one group was eating the ketogenic diet. The other group was eating around 200 grams of carbs a day and low fat. So you can see that the fat mass decreased a ton more with the ketogenic diet. The body fat percent went down more with the ketogenic diet. And you may be thinking, well, what about performance? The cool thing is that performance increased the same for both the ketogenic and the standard diet group. So there was no difference in the change. And what they did was kind of like a baseline workout, which you guys will do with the Paleo Challenge. They conducted the same CrossFit workout at the beginning as the end. So I think that's really promising too, that was happening with just 6 weeks. All right, so enough about performance. Here's our best keto food options. So I know this is kind of small, but when you look at this, I highlighted the only ones here that are not allowed in paleo. So everything else on this list you could also have on a paleo diet. It starts with ground beef, ribeye steak, and short ribs. Those are going to be your best red meats, and they're the fattiest ones. Those are going to be the best for keto. You could also do, flank steak or skirt steak, which is a little leaner. You just have to make sure you have fat added, whether it's butter or coconut oil. Chicken thighs, legs, and wings are going to be the best, the dark meat. Salmon is best in terms of fish. Whole eggs, you definitely want to eat the yolk. Salami and pepperoni. In terms of dairy, you can do full-fat cheese, full-fat sour cream, heavy cream, full-fat coconut milk, bacon, sausage, butter, coconut oil, and fatty nuts. So the best ketogenic nut is the macadamia nut. It's got like the lowest protein and carb, highest fat ratio. So nuts are great too.
Jess, is that saying that you should not have chicken breasts?
No, you can have chicken breast, but you just have to make sure you have some fat added. So you could cook it in butter, add some Alfredo sauce on top of it, have some avocado with it. It's not a very fatty cut of meat.
Okay, thanks.
All right, so our favorable keto vegetables. Again, any of these would be acceptable as part of a paleo diet as well. Everything from asparagus to broccoli, cabbage, cauliflower, celery, leafy greens, any type of salad green, garlic, mushrooms, onions, peppers, zucchini, summer squash. So all of the low glycemic index vegetables. What you're not seeing here is the starchy tubers, okay? So potatoes, sweet potatoes, squash, winter squashes. Some of our staples, like I said, the zucchini noodles, and like cauliflower rice is a great thing. You can buy it already pureed, so it's just ready to put in the pan and cook, and it comes out kind of the consistency of rice. Now the difference, like I said, this is the difference with the paleo veggies. So all of these are the same, but now you have the addition of white potato, sweet potato, butternut squash, carrots, beets, turnips, parsnips, all of those root vegetables. All right, so now we're going to take you through a keto diet sample day. You saw the paleo sample day. Let's see what the foods look like on keto. One breakfast option is what we call bulletproof coffee. Sounds crazy, but it's actually so delicious. So you blend in a blender a cup of hot coffee with a tablespoon of MCT oil and a tablespoon of grass-fed butter, again, the Kerrygold. Now MCT, that stands for medium chain triglyceride. It's a really special type of fat that's processed differently than any other fat. It bypasses the lymph system, goes directly to the liver where it's converted to ketones. So it really helps you to get into a state of ketosis. And it's one of the reasons why after drinking this, you feel so energized and good for hours and hours and hours. So the best one, if you're taking this seriously, is the Bulletproof brand. It's called Brain Octane Oil. And you definitely want to work up slowly to that full tablespoon because it can cause, a little bit of digestive distress if you take the whole tablespoon your first day. So you want to work up to that. Definitely the full tablespoon of butter. Blend it up. You can also, if you like a sweeter coffee, you can use Truvia. We're going to talk about some other safe sweeteners, but Truvia does not spike insulin or blood sugar, so that's a good keto option. So So it gets frothy and creamy. It's like a latte. Has anyone tried this?
I don't like coffee.
You don't like coffee? I was not a coffee drinker until this, and now this is what I have for breakfast every day. Yeah. Okay, so an alternative breakfast, though, if you don't like coffee, is traditional. So 2 to 3 eggs, 2 to 3 slices of bacon, and some avocado. Very simple, but it will be filling, it'll be satiating. You could have this for dinner, you could have it for lunch. Eggs are so easy, and they're really the perfect keto food. Some lunch options, you could do a Cobb salad. It's perfect if you're out to eat. You could have ranch or blue cheese dressing. Ideally, it would be an avocado oil based dressing if you have it. You could do lettuce wraps. You could make them at home in a romaine leaf, or Jimmy John's again. And with keto, you can have the cheese. Just saying. So that's what the unwich. Dinner option could be a lettuce wrapped burger with bacon and guacamole and cauliflower rice as your side. An alternate dinner could be zucchini noodles and sausage meatballs. You can find them, like I said, already pureed, which makes it really easy. You could do an Alfredo sauce with this. You could do a low sugar marinara sauce as well. And then snack ideas on keto. Any of these would be great. The only ones that you couldn't do on paleo would be like the cheese and then the cream cheese, but everything else would be perfectly acceptable on paleo as well. Questions about that so far? You guys are all just really smart. All right, so we talked about the first similarity between both diets being that they both don't allow added sugar. The second similarity is that they both don't allow grains, okay? And there's some reasons for that. The first is that grains don't have many nutrients, and they actually also have anti-nutrients. So these are proteins that bind to calcium, magnesium, zinc, iron that are already into our system and don't let us absorb them fully, okay? So they prevent the body from absorbing those important nutrients. They also don't have as much fiber as we're led to believe. So vegetables have 8 times the fiber as the same amount of whole grains, and fruit has twice the fiber as the same amount of whole grains. So if you're eating vegetables, or on keto or on paleo, vegetables and fruit, you're definitely going to be getting enough fiber. They're also high in carbohydrates, and if we're trying to keep that blood sugar and insulin level low, that's not going to be very helpful with that. And then they're very irritating to the gut lining. So we need to touch on this for a second. There's something called leaky gut. And what happens is, in a normal healthy gut, our intestinal lining is very smooth and there's no junctions open. It's nice tight junctions here. But when we eat gluten, which is that protein in grain, it over time will punch holes in those junctions, and then any undigested food particles in the gut can go back out and into our bloodstream where they never should be in the first place. But when they're there, our immune system recognizes them as foreign. So it doesn't know better. It thinks that these food particles are like a bacteria or virus, and it elicits an immune response. And that can look different in all different people. So for some people, it could be achy joints. Like if you wake up in the morning and your ankles or your wrists are kind of achy. For other people, it can be inflammation and bloating. For others, it's a runny nose that's kind of chronic. But it manifests in different ways. But it all stems from leaky gut, which is most likely from gluten consumption. So the interesting thing is that it takes the gut 10 to 15 days to repair itself from one exposure to grains. So that's why during the challenge period, I always tell people, yeah, you might have a birthday or a celebration halfway through, but just realize that's going to set you back. I mean, your gut's just starting to heal again, and now it's kind of starting over. So to really see the full benefits, you want to stick to the no grains for that full 6-week period. All right, a third similarity between both is very limited alcohol. And for the challenge period, it would be no alcohol. Alcohol is high in carbs and sugar. It actually has twice as many calories per gram as sugar itself. It gives a large insulin response. It turns off growth hormone release, inhibits testosterone production, and decreases our physical performance by 40%. So a lot of people who are really interested in their performance in the gym don't want any of these things to happen. So for those reasons, we definitely want to take alcohol out of the picture. In addition, it has a diuretic effect. And this is most important on a ketogenic diet because in ketosis, when your insulin level is chronically low, your kidneys don't retain sodium, potassium, magnesium, those electrolytes, like they normally do on a standard diet or even on a paleo diet. But when you're already in a mild state of dehydration because of that, and then you drink alcohol, it's just can really be bad for your body. So lots of water on either diet, but I would definitely say alcohol can have a place in maintenance, but it shouldn't be like an every weekend thing. The fourth similarity is the food quality. So both of these plans focus on real whole foods. All right, think about going to the perimeter of the grocery store. All the good stuff is there. You don't even need to go down the aisles of processed stuff. You'll save yourself lots of time and energy. Think of it that way. Quality meats is another thing they have in common. So if you can do grass-fed and pastured if possible, if you can get your meat from a local farmer, there's a lot of them actually around here that have really good both beef and chicken. That's going to be the best option. And then you also want to stay away from those anti-inflammatory oils. So like we talked about, the good ones are the coconut oil, olive oil, avocado oil, and butter. And you want to stay away from the vegetable oils and margarine. So this is all true for both paleo and keto. Another similarity is sweeteners. Okay, so these are going to be the best ones on both plans because they do not spike insulin and they do not spike blood sugar. So if you do have to have something sweet to sweeten up your coffee, this would be a good option. Truvia, stevia liquid drops, because even stevia in the raw, the packets, the powdered form are bound to maltodextrin, which is sugar. So we can't do those, especially on keto. Erythritol, which is a sugar alcohol, is a safe option. In the store, you'll see it known as Swerve. So that comes in both a granulated and a powdered form. And then maintenance paleo, so say you're doing paleo for the year and you're after the challenge, you could add in small amounts of honey, maple syrup, agave, coconut sugar, dates, or other dried fruit once you are where you want to be in terms of your goals. If you still have a weight loss goal, these are probably things you want to continue to keep out. Another similarity is the importance of food prep. Okay, so this is really important probably no matter what diet you do. And this is something that's really important each week to find a day to make time for this, whether it's a weekend day or a weeknight, sometime where you can grocery shop and then come home. And even if it's just the proteins, even if you just cook up some, put on the grill some sausage, some chicken, some hamburger patties, some steaks, you have the whole variety done. So now during the week, all you've got to do is steam a bag of vegetables, add some butter, add a little fruit. But if the main course is made or the main protein is made, it's going to be a lot easier. So definitely that's a tip I would recommend. All right, so let's talk about some differences because there are some big differences. And the first one is the protein quantity. Now on paleo, like I said, the meat is pretty much unlimited. You can pretty much have as much protein as you can handle. On keto, you can't, because what happens is if you have more protein than your body consumes, your liver turns that protein into sugar through a process called gluconeogenesis. And that little bit of sugar can kick you out of ketosis. Okay, so I like this little graph. It shows you blood sugar over time. So when you eat fat, you can see there's very little blood sugar response to fat, little if any. All right, with carbs, there's a ton. That's why we really have to limit carbs on keto. But with protein, there's also some, not quite as much as carbs, but so you do have to be cautious of your protein intake on a ketogenic diet. So for females, on average, it's like 50 to 80 grams a day. And for males, it's about 80 to 120 grams a day. And that's based on activity level, size. There's a lot of different factors that come into play. But it's definitely lower than it would be on a paleo diet. The second difference is the carb source, which we already mentioned. So on paleo, you can have all veggies, including the starchy veggies, and all fruit. So no fruit is off limits. On keto, there's no starchy veggies and no fruits, with the exception of berries after adaptation. Those are pretty low sugar, so some people can get away with them after they're well keto adapted. The third difference is dairy, okay? So on paleo, there is no dairy allowed with the exception of butter and whey protein. So again, butter is not problematic in many people, and if it is, ghee is a great option, that clarified butter. Whey protein is another option that we allow on the Paleo Challenge just because of the convenient factor, and again, it doesn't affect most people negatively. But like I said, you could also use a beef protein isolate or an egg white protein. Those are great options as well. Now on keto, all full fat dairy is allowed. So you don't want to do any of the part skim, reduced fat, light, and you'll see that a lot nowadays. You want the full fat variety. We cannot do cottage cheese because it's too high in protein. No milk, so even whole milk is too high in lactose, which is that milk sugar, or half and half, but you can do heavy cream. So heavy cream is good, not half and half or milk. No yogurt, even Greek yogurt is going to be too high in carbs, and no fake cheeses like Velveeta or Cheese Whiz that are very highly processed. So this is a major difference, you guys. I often tell people when they come into my office, they're like, okay, what do I want to do? I'll say, do you prefer fruit or cheese? Because if you can't say goodbye to fruit, then you got to go paleo. If you can't say goodbye to cheese, then keto might be the best for you. So that can be a big deciding factor. And I still believe a lot of the paleo principles when it comes to dairy are modern, very overly processed dairy that's been fed a ton of antibiotics and hormones is probably not very healthy. But if you can find like the Kerrygold, which is a grass-fed pastured cheese, and you can find this now at Harris Teeter, even at BJ's. I get the big one at BJ's. That actually has a lot of good vitamins in it. It's got K2, it's got CLA, so it's a really good nutrient-dense food. But when you get the regular cheese from the grocery store, whether it's shredded, whether it's the pre-sliced, that's generally coming from factory-farmed animals who are given a ton of hormones and a ton of antibiotics, and it may not be the best choice. So with our style of keto, I definitely do dairy in moderation. It's still not a staple in my type of ketogenic diet. All right, a fourth difference is the testing. So one great thing about keto is you can test and know if you're doing it right. I love that. It's black and white. All right, so ketone level can be directly tested to ensure that you're doing the diet correctly. One way is by the urine test. So you can buy these urine strips over the counter at the drugstore or on Amazon. They're very cheap. You pee on them. It'll tell you, do I have, little bit more or a lot of ketones basically in my system based on the color. It's not super accurate. A lot of times it's based on your hydration level. So I wouldn't recommend that over time. The second way is by breath, which there's a breath meter that you can buy for about $200. Again, I haven't used that one very frequently. So the one I recommend is the blood meter. It's super accurate. It's kind of the gold standard when testing for ketosis. And there are two of them out there. One's called the Precision Extra. The other one is pretty new. It's called the Keto Mojo. And both of them require just a tiny finger pick, just like you would if you were a diabetic testing your glucose. You put the little drop of blood on the strip, and within 10 seconds, it's going to tell you your ketone level. So again, you want that to be above 0.5 millimoles per liter to be considered in nutritional ketosis. So once you get there, which generally takes about a week or two, that you see that positive reading, it doesn't mean that you're fully keto adapted. It just means that your body's producing ketones from breaking down fat. You're not going to feel the full benefits until like the 4 to 6 week mark, when your brain and your gut have upregulated the receptors to use those fats. Okay, so that's the difference between being in ketosis and keto adaptation. The adaptation is a little bit longer process. But the cool thing is, once you've been doing it for like 2 months, you can experiment with things. Like once I had a lot of positive readings, I knew I was in a good state of ketosis, I wanted to test a Quest bar. Like, can I get a Quest bar back in my diet? As I did a full Quest bar, the next morning I tested, I was out. I was below that 0.5 threshold. Okay, so I couldn't do the whole Quest bar. A week later, I wanted to test a protein shake post-workout. I missed my post-workout shake. So I did my protein shake, next morning test, I was out. So you can figure it out, and it's different from person to person. You know, what if some people can handle more or less than others. So that's the interesting thing with having the meter, is you're really going to know black and white, am I doing this right, and what can my body handle. All right, the fifth difference is the importance of electrolytes. So it's very easy in the beginning of keto to get dehydrated. And the symptom, you will know very clearly, you will get a headache. And it's like a really numbing, like front of your head headache. And I don't ever get headaches, so I knew what it was when I got it. But it's for the same reason. When your insulin levels are low, chronically low, your kidneys stop retaining electrolytes. So you have to replenish the electrolytes. On a standard American diet, your doctor will tell you not to add salt to your food, right? Because you don't want your blood pressure to go up. But when you take the carbs and the sugars out and your insulin is low, you have to replenish the salt. Your body needs salt. So the one surefire way to get rid of that headache is to have a bouillon cube mixed in hot water, because that's like 2 grams of sodium right in that one cube. The headache will be gone like that. All right, but in the meantime, you always want to salt your food. And this pink Himalayan salt is awesome because it also has trace minerals in it as well. So use that liberally on all of your food, and your electrolytes will be replenished. Magnesium is another important electrolyte. So you want to, especially if you're working out, you want to get 400 milligrams of this each and every night before bed. It has a relaxing effect on the body. And if you don't do this, you're going to get those horrible calf cramps in the night. Have you ever had that when you have to stand up out of bed, like flex your toe? So yeah, definitely want to supplement with that magnesium. All right. So if you are interested in more info on the ketogenic diet, we have a YouTube channel, Patrick and I, and it's got lots of great videos on it, so little short clips that give you some really valuable information. It's called Keto Vision, so look that up. This is probably the book I would recommend. It is awesome. Keto Clarity by Jimmy Moore. Everything you need to know about the ketogenic diet, how to put it in practice, some recipes at the end. These are also some really good books as well on keto. For more info on the paleo diet, these are the top 3 I would recommend. This is the first book I ever read about paleo, and I was hooked, before I got to the end. It's really a good book, The Paleo Solution by Rob Wolf. It Starts with Food is another great book, the creator of the Whole 30, which is very similar to a paleo challenge. And then Practical Paleo is another great reference. So, and in the meantime, guys, if you have questions, if you're like, man, I don't know if I want to wait till January now that I have all this information in my head. I work with people one-on-one. I've probably started over 70 people now on the ketogenic diet since last January. And when people saw Kelly's results, the female pictures that I showed, a lot of people started coming to me and became more interested in the diet. So we've had a lot of success here at the gym with CrossFit athletes with both keto and paleo. They're both terrific diets and lifestyles. It's just personal preference. What do you prefer? And I will tell you this, if you start with paleo and then go to keto, it's easier, okay, than going from, like if you're doing kind of more of a standard diet with breads and rice and pasta and then go to keto, it's going to be a harder switch. So hopefully that gives you guys some information to kind of help make up your minds. And like I said, come January 8th, that's when we're going to do our big group challenge.